Hi everybody, Michael Tyler here with another free Vectric project of the month. This month's free Vectric project is compatible with the Aspire software, and it's a very special Christmas decoration item that can be used for displaying your home as a table centerpiece or placed anywhere you like. I call this project the Steampunk Santa Sleigh because it features a pseudo-futuristic Victorian-era industrial style. The sleigh has 3 rockets attached, and this is so Santa can make his deliveries with or without the assistance of his flying reindeer. You know, in case the reindeer gets sick or otherwise incapacitated for some reason. The sleigh also features a generous compartment to hold Christmas candy treats, poinsettia, or any other Christmas-related items you like. This is a fun project I believe you'll enjoy making. As usual, log on to your Vectric V&Co account where you can download all the Aspire project files, the illustrated step-by-step PDF instructions, as well as this cutting, construction, and finishing video. If you make this project, please post a photo of it on the Vectric user forum. And if you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe so you won't miss any future projects. Now on with the video. Okay, getting ready to run the rocket engine file, and you'll notice on the notes in the Aspire file itself I have specified set your Z0 at the bottom of the material, not the top, but you want to set it at the bottom, which is your spoil board. So I've got a Z0 plate here, it's setting on the spoil board, and we'll go ahead and set this Z for the bit at the bottom of the material. Okay, I just want to mention a couple things about pierced carvings. That's what this is. Pierced carving simply means that the carving bit is allowed to go all the way through to the bottom of the material, and that's exactly why the Z0 setting for the material setup was set at the bottom of the material, so that allows these models that are placed at the bottom of the material to be carved at the proper dimension, because when these halves are glued together they form a perfect cylinder. The material that I specified in the file was 0.75 inches thick. Well, this material actually was a little bit more than that, which is what you want. You want a little bit more, if not exact. So this was 0.757, something like that. And if I had set the Z0 at the top of the material, these would be a little bit larger. They would have had a sort of a base on the bottom of them, and when you glued them together it would not have formed a perfect cylinder. So by setting the Z0 at the bottom of the material, that assures that the bit is traveling all the way to the bottom of the material and actually cutting through in these areas like that. So if you've never done a pierced carving before, this is what it looks like. It looks like, you know, sort of a mess, but it's really perfectly fine. It's perfectly normal. And once you separate these parts from the 3D tabs that I've placed in the design and then glue these parts together, sand them up, it comes out to be just exactly like it was intended. So I just thought I'd mention that for those of you who have never done or seen pierced carving before. We've got the gimbal rocket halves here, a solid, one with the dowel hole solid, and just want to remove the fuzzies on the underside by laying a piece of 220 sandpaper on a flat surface, rubbing it back and forth a couple times, getting rid of any fuzzies underneath, anything that might interfere with the glue up. Okay, I'm applying some glue to the gimbal engine, the half with the dowel hole first. I just want to make sure that I don't get any glue into that dowel hole. So I'm being a little careful about how much glue I'm putting on there. And I'll put a little bit on this side too. Okay, we'll just press these together. This translucent glue sets up pretty quickly, so I'm just going to let that set a few seconds, and then I'll put it in final position and clamp it with some rubber bands. Alright, you notice that I did not do any final sanding on these rocket gimbals and gimbal rockets. That's because I'm going to go ahead and let that glue dry, and then after the fact then I will do the final sanding. Okay, I'll clamp this one together with rubber bands, and then we'll move on with the inner parts of the sleigh. Alright, we're ready to glue up the inside of the sleigh, and you'll notice that there are two of these in this configuration and three with this configuration. So these three go in the middle and the plain ones go on the outside, so just make sure you have the order right. And I've got some 1/8 inch dowels, and by the way, I test fit these dowels to make sure that the holes were big enough or the dowels were small enough so everything could fit snugly but not so tight you can't deal with it. So I cut 4 lengths about 4.5 inches long, and I'm just going to start with that one outside piece and put these dowels in, and then I'll apply some glue around the surface of the first section. And I'll brush it around, spread it out a little bit. So these dowels will act as guides as we build up this interior portion of the sleigh. I'm going to take my next section and just spread some glue on that. Okay, and then we'll just slide that over the dowels. That will keep everything nice and in line while the glue sets up. Okay, I'll just repeat the process and just glue one at a time until I get all those glued together, and then we'll weigh it down. Okay, we'll glue the rear engine together, and I'm just using this 2 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch dowel insert into the base here, and then I'll just go ahead and stack these one by one onto the dowel. Okay, I've got the sleigh sides ready to glue onto the interior assembly, and this is not finish sanded yet around the perimeter, because once I glue that in place, then I'll be able to blend this side, both sides, to the interior part after it's glued up. So the final sanding will take place then. So we'll just go ahead and apply glue onto the sleigh assembly. And I'll do that for the other side as well. Once this is glued up, then I'll apply some clamps and let that dry. I've got a sheet of wax paper on the work surface here, and I'll glue this upright because I want to be sure that the bottom is completely flat, so I've got this on a flat surface. Alright. So you just want to line up both of these sides with the interior assembly. And again, I'm using that translucent glue that sets up pretty quick, so once it gets tacky, then I'll be able to position these before clamping. Okay, I'll just let that set up just a little bit, and I'll clamp it up till it's dry. Okay, the sleigh sides are dry. I've removed the clamps. I'm in the process of sanding the sides to blend in with the inner assembly here. So I'm just using various grits of sandpaper, and this, of course, I want to make sure it remains flat, and I've already sanded that some, but you can see here that there's a little bit of extension over the inner part assembly, so I'm just going to blend that in, and I'll go all around the perimeter where necessary and blend that to the inner assembly there. Okay, we're ready to assemble the sleigh runners, and first of all, we're going to do it in two parts. First of all, I will glue the shelf for the sleigh, and I'm going to lay this on a flat surface with wax paper, as you can see, and we'll just glue these end pieces on and allow them to dry. I'll clamp that up off camera, let that dry. And then we'll come back and glue the actual runners on after this base is dry. Okay, the base is dry, and we're going to glue on these runners, and I just want to be sure to mark a location on these runners so that they're even with each other. So this is the front, and I'm going to make a mark 1 inch away from this edge on each of these runners, and that will be my alignment mark for when I glue this to the base. That's 1 inch there, 1 inch there, and that locates this approximately in the middle. It's a little biased towards the back, but that's what we want. And so I'll just apply some glue on the sides of the base. Do that for both sides. And just line that up with our marks. and apply a couple clamps. And I'll just put some weight on top to keep this from tipping from the weight of those clamps. And we'll let that dry. Okay, I'm in the process of putting a coat or two of thinned Zinsser Bullseye Sealcoat. I use a 50-50 mixture of Bullseye Sealcoat, which is just 100% clear de-waxed shellac, is all it is. And I mix that in equal parts with denatured alcohol. And that makes a good sealer for the wood, plus it raises any fuzzies left over from the carve and allows you to remove them a little bit easier because it'll stiffen them up once this seal coat mixture dries. So I've got the rockets coated and the runners here in a second, and then after that sand them up, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the finishing process. Okay, I'm getting ready to stain this sleigh itself with the Rust-Oleum Ultimate Wood Stain color called Cabernet. It's a very brownish, reddish color. I thought would be nice for this sleigh. So I'll brush it on, wipe it on, and get that all stained up and let her dry. So I think I'll go ahead and wipe on as much as I can, and then follow up with a brush to get in some of the crevices. I like this Ultimate Stain because it does dry pretty fast. It can dry in as little as an hour, depending on humidity. It might take a little longer. Okay, I'll just go ahead and continue with this. I'll stop the video and come back when it's all done. Okay, I've got this all stained up, and I'm going to set it aside to dry. Once it's dry, I'll coat it with a few light coats of Krylon Clear, just to seal it before I apply some metallic paints. Okay, I've given everything several light coats of crystal clear gloss Krylon, just to help seal the wood before I apply paint. And then after the gloss dries, then I'm going to apply a couple light coats of this flat crystal clear Krylon, just so that the paint has something to bite onto a little better instead of the gloss. And so we'll go ahead with the rest of the process after I complete the clear coat sealers. Okay, the gloss is all dry, so I'm getting ready to just apply a few coats of the flat crystal clear, just to enable the paint that I'm going to apply next a little bit of bite to stick onto. Okay, for the runners, I'm going to first apply some black matte Krylon spray paint overall, and then that'll be sort of what I call a reverse painting, because I want black inside these areas that are recessed, and then I'm going to come back and apply some metallic paints over these flat areas. So I'll start out with the black, and that'll give a good background and coating for the underside as well. So I'm going to paint this all black with the flat black Krylon paint. All right, I'm all set up to start painting some of the metallics on the sleigh sides and the runners I've got waiting over here. I got the rocket parts, the side rockets, and the main rear rocket, all waiting to be painted with some of these metallic paints I've got. I've got an assortment here. I don't know that I'll use all these different metallic colors, but they're ready to go in case I decide to. Also got some regular plain acrylic paints, non-metallic, in case I decide to use those. Plus I've got a bunch of metallic paint pens, which I like to use, and an assortment of brushes in case I decide to use any of the small brushes to get into the smaller details. Alright, so we'll get started here in a second. Alright, I'm starting with this gold paint pen, and shook it up really well, and then you just go ahead and pump that tip up and down. I like to take off a little bit of the excess paint on the paper plate, and then I'll start with the edges on this sleigh side and get that in the frame there for you. Coverage is pretty good on these paint pens, and you can see how easy it is, especially on a flat surface. It's got this chisel tip, and it's ideal for applying these metallics on flat surfaces like that. If you do find that the coverage isn't what you want it, then you can always wait for this to dry and then apply a second coat over that. But like I say, the coverage is pretty good on this, so I seldom need to apply a second coat, but you really don't know until after it's dried a bit. Okay, so I'll continue on with doing this edge and then come back. Okay, I've got the gold border all the way done, or it's actually supposed to represent brass, and then I broke out this silver paint pen and starting to paint some areas where I think the silver might look good. So I don't know how many different shades of colors of metallic paints I'll use. Now these are solvent based, these paints that are contained in the paint pens, so if you do make a mistake, you'll need to use a little bit of thinner. Just use caution so you don't, when you're wiping off a mistake, you don't eat through the existing finish there. Of course, the acrylic metallics, they're water-based, so all you need to do if you make a mistake is just wipe that off with a dampened rag. So that might be an advantage of using the acrylic water-based type paints over using a paint pen. But man, I really like these chisel tips. They're just perfect for absolute control over these flat areas. Easier than a brush for sure. So I'll continue on and make decisions what gets what color, what metallic color on all these elements, and then I'll come back to you and then I'll do the other side. I just had to show you that how small this particular paint pen tip is. It's absolutely perfect for getting into these tiny details. It makes painting the tiny details just so easy, way easier than a brush. Alright, I've finished one side of the sleigh, and even after gathering up all these different color of metallic paints and regular color paints, I ended up only using silver, rose gold, which sort of looks like a copper color, and the gold, and then I've got the fine tip silver and fine tip gold. So basically three colors, rose gold, gold, and silver. And that's how I completed this side. I'll let that dry a little bit more, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side and continue on with the rockets and the sleigh runners. Okay, while the sleigh is drying, I'm going to go ahead and apply the metallic paints to the runners, and along with that I'm going to paint 6 of these dowel caps, dowel hole covers, for insertion into, you got 3 holes on the sides of the runners, on 3 on each side, so a total of 6, so I'll paint those caps gold with the paint pens as well. Okay, I'll continue with this and come back when I've got one side done, show you what it looks like. Okay, I've got the one side of the sleigh runner done, and I'll just let this dry, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side as well. Okay, I'm in the process of painting the rocket engines, and I'm using a gunmetal metallic from Deco Art, and I really like this color. I did squirt out some of the silver Deco Art, thinking I was going to use that for the main part of the engines, but I like this gunmetal a little better, and I'll probably use the paint pens to create some silver highlights after I'm done with this base coat. Okay, I'll just keep on painting, and then I'll come back a little bit later. You can see what it looks like. Okay, the paint's dry on both the sleigh and the sleigh runners. I'm still in the process of painting the rocket engines, but while that paint is drying, I'm going to go ahead and do the next step for the runners and the sleigh. I plan to apply a glaze technique over both the runners and the sleigh itself, and also on the rocket engines. Now you could stop here if you want to. If this is the look that you want, that's fine. You could just apply your final clear coat and be done with it. But I'm going to go ahead and apply a very, very light coat of Krylon Clear over the sleigh sides and the sides of the runners. And that'll seal this metallic paint so that I can apply a glaze over it and wipe it off. And that will then dry, and then I'll apply my final clear coats over that. So you have a choice. You can leave yours as is, like this, with no glaze, no antiquing glaze, and finish up with a clear coat, or you can do like I do and apply that glaze coat after I've sealed this layer of paint, and then apply the glaze and apply your final seal coat. Alright, I've got the metallic paint sealed with the Krylon Clear light coats, and I'm going to make a glaze out of this acrylic black paint. It's a flat black paint. So I squirted some of it on a paper plate, and I'm going to use a couple brushes. One's a older brush, unclean, kind of stiff, and a newer brush. So what I'm going to do is to apply this black paint. I'm going to thin it a little bit with water and wipe it off right away, and that'll give this more of an older antique look to it. If you've never done glazing before, this might seem a little scary, but it's really a pretty easy process. But because this is acrylic paint, you do need to work quickly so the paint doesn't dry on you before you have a chance to wipe it off. And just take a rag and start wiping. You see some areas where you want to get some of the paint out with out of the crevices, a little more paint out of the crevices. Just dab it with a brush. That's lifting some of that paint out of there and exposing it so that you can wipe it off. Okay, that gives it more of that sort of antique brass look, and that's what I was looking for, was that not so gold, but more of a old brass look. Okay, I'll turn the camera off now, do the other side, then we'll come back and do the sleigh itself. Okay, I got both sides of the sleigh rails, or sleigh runners, done, and I'll set that aside to dry. And we'll go ahead and do the sleigh sides. Same way, thin this black paint up a little bit. And just dab it on. I should say scrub it on. Now on this particular part of the project, I'm going to go ahead and be careful to wipe any of this glaze off of the edges, like on the top side here and the bottom and the front. So I'm just working this glaze in. I like that. That gives it a real rich antique appearance. I'm just going to dampen this rag a little bit so I can wipe off whatever I got over the edge here. Oh, not much. That came out good. Okay, I'm just going to stipple this a little bit, just get some of that out of the edges, and wipe it off again. Okay, I think that side's done. I'll go ahead and flip it over and do the other side. Okay, I'm going to apply glaze to the two gimbal rockets. I'm not going to glaze the rear main rocket, so I'll just set that aside. Okay, that one's done. I'll just set that aside to dry and do the other one. Okay, I've got everything already glazed and it's dry. So I've got to apply the final clear coats. I'm going to apply a few light coats of the Krylon Clear Gloss and see how that looks. I may follow that up with a Krylon Clear Satin finish, so I'll see how that looks and make a decision then. But all of the parts now are going to get a final clear coat, and then we'll come back and do the final assembly of the Santa Steampunk Sleigh. Okay, I'm in the process of gluing these gold dowel hole caps into the runners. So I'm just applying a little bit of glue with a toothpick and placing them in the holes. There's 3 on each side. And if they need a little persuasion to go in the holes, just tap them in with a rubber mallet. And I'll do this for both sides. Okay, next we'll glue the main rear rocket onto the back of the sleigh. And I had some painter's tape there and some painter's tape here to just leave some bare wood for this future glue up. So I'm going to use a combination of a little wood glue and also super glue, so I don't have to hold it there very long, and that super glue will bond right away and the wood glue will bond a little bit slower, but that'll make a good permanent bond there. So I'm just going to place this rocket more or less centered. I'm just going to eyeball it into the back of this rectangle there. What I like to do is to spray a little accelerator on one of the surfaces and apply the glue to the mating surface. Get that to come out. Okay, just hold that there a few seconds for that CA glue to take hold. Alright, so that's done. Okay, next we're going to glue the gimbal rockets to the sleigh, and I've just glued in a 1.5 inch dowel into the gimbal rocket, and I insert that into the side of the sleigh, and do that for the other side as well. And you can put these at any angle that you want. I'm going to leave them horizontal, but you could, make it like this, so it looks like it's steering the sleigh up if you want. I'm going to leave it horizontal. Okay, I'll let that dry. Okay, the final part of the assembly is to attach your sleigh to the base, and you have the option of either just gluing it in place permanently or drilling a couple of holes down into the through the bottom of the sleigh and down into the base. And if you do that, just use a couple number 6 1-inch screws, or maybe even 1 1/4 inch screws, depending on how far you countersink it. So I'll leave that up to you to choose whether to glue it in place permanently or to make the sleigh removable from the runners. Okay, after attaching the sleigh to the runners, I went ahead and put 4 of these felt pads onto the runners, two on each runner, just to protect table surfaces and protect the bottom runner surface. Alright everybody, thank you for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed making your very own Santa steampunk sleigh. This is Michael Tyler signing off for now until next month with another free Vectric project of the month. Happy carving!